Have you found that there's a lot of hesitation from schools or districts to fully buy in and adapt to something that they're not really used to?
Yeah, school districts, unfortunately, there's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of bureaucracy. There's budgeting issues. There's timing issues. With families, some families want immediate gratification and aren't necessarily willing to put in the work long term. And so there are definitely a lot of barriers. But I think, what we do is definitely a science, but it's also an art, and I think it's more of an art than a science. And so you have to be artful in the way that you communicate with people, you establish relationships, because establishing that baseline, that foundation, that human to human contact, that is going to be key. Because when things go bad, you're going to have that open conversation. You're going to be able to be honest. But if you don't have that connection and things go bad, then people get angry at each other, and then that kind of things get derailed.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Business of Learning podcast. My name is Joao Camargo, and my guest here today is Joe Rubio, who is the CEO and founder at Beam. Joe, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
I'm excited to have this conversation as well. We've had a couple of people in a similar industry, similar niche to yourself, but I would love for us to start off with you just telling everyone a little bit more about Beam, who you guys are, what you do, and who you help.
Yeah, we started kind of on the periphery doing some side work for districts back in like 2016, 2017. The side hustle got a little bit too tough and became the main hustle. And so around 2019, my business partner and I decided that we were going to start Beam. And we went through all the paperwork and we were super excited to start a company. But both of us are educational psychologists by trade and training, and we're not business people. And so there was a big learning curve when it came to understanding business and how it works and how to run a business and things like that. Historically, my family's always been entrepreneurs and I've always had that entrepreneurial spirit. But right around 2019, we started the company. We put about $1,500 in the bank account, each of us, to start the company. And here we are, 2025. And yesterday we actually had some really big news as a company. We made the Inc. 5000 list for fastest companies in America for 2020.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll know our ranking here in a few weeks. But it was super exciting news to get because it's just kind of a testament to everything that we've worked for and all the things that our school has worked for. So yeah, we've been growing steadily for the last 5 years.
That's so awesome. Again, congratulations on that. So it's always cool to make the charts. We'll call it. We'll call it like the charts, right? And it's go ahead. No,
But it's about, at the end of the day, helping kids, because that's who we serve. We serve kids in districts all across Southern California, and particularly families who have been marginalized by school districts or feel underrepresented. We try or do our best to go in and represent them the best that we know how to do it. So.
yeah, that's so awesome. And when we first had our conversation, you give me a little bit more detail than we will have time for here today about the trajectory and the journey. And it's so awesome to see how just having that quick vision, the things happening by chance, I guess, and just how it plays out. Of course, by chance, but also not by chance, because as you're starting to go through it, you start to learn. And those $1,500 from everyone now turned into being at a Inc. 5000, which is phenomenal, right? Talk to me a little bit more about that process of growing a team, trying to find your spot into what you guys were doing, because yes, it started as a side hustle, but very quickly it was no longer the side hustle. It was a main hustle that turned into what it is now today. So talk to me about that period of growing the team, finding the right people, putting them in the right seats, and that developing process.
Yeah, a lot of my leadership style was kind of nurtured and fostered throughout my first career. I used to be a Los Angeles County deputy sheriff.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and I quickly decided that, that wasn't really something that I wanted to pursue lifetime. And so I went into education, and immediately in my first job, well, my second job really with one of the districts out here in Southern California, the superintendent, Dr. John Garcia, he was really influential in how I became a leader and how I wanted to lead a team. We did a lot of work around leadership, and one of the books we read during my tenure there was Good to Great. And you talk about passengers on the bus and finding the right people to bring on your bus, but then from a more narrow perspective, trying to figure out where to put those people on the bus, because they belong there, but maybe their skill set doesn't necessarily agree with their current job position. And so
Mhm.
um, we quickly found out that early on as a company is learning how to tap out, realizing that you can't do everything and that you're not an expert in everything and that you have to kind of stay in your lane. I think the job of a CEO is really to lead a company, but also to lead a company from the perspective of not knowing, right? Really understanding
Mm.
what other people are doing in the company, and
Yeah.
then helping to give them the necessary tools to complete that job, and so I
Hmm.
learned pretty early on that I needed a team to do that to help me, and so we started off with an HR director, and then from
Mm.
there we built out our foundation. Um,
Mm.
and now, we have behavior supervisors, we have recruiters, we have operation managers, we have a team working on our accounting, all of those things that make a company run, that I couldn't do it myself, and I think a lot
Yeah.
of people want to be owner operators, but the reality is that you have to tap out sometimes. You got to ask for help, and
Yeah.
collaboration is key for me.
Yeah, and that's awesome to hear because I've found it a recurring pattern in so many different conversations that I've had that there's often such a huge goal of impact that wants to be achieved. And if you want to achieve that goal, there's so many other things that you have to let go of to be able to get to that place. Because as you said, you cannot simply cannot do everything at once. And especially when let's say even if you were doing everything at once, you're probably putting 10-20% of effort into those things as opposed to one, two, three, four, five people that can take 100% of their effort and put it into that. So it's just part of the sacrifice along the way. And it's cool to hear those lessons from you as well. I'd be curious to hear what are some common misconceptions that people have when it comes to behavioral psychology, just mentoring in the first place. I find that there are often so many different connotations, especially with terms like coaching, mentoring. People tend to either have, oh yeah, it's really good, or oh, it's just very trash. It's a scam for everyone. So I would love to hear some of the common misconceptions and how do you guys educate people on why it's actually an important thing.
Yeah, I think some of the common misconceptions is that the problem lies within the student that you're working with, and that's not necessarily true, right? The behaviors are coming from there, but the reality is that environment has a lot to do with impact. And so a lot of the work that we do has to do around parent education, psychoeducation, working with teachers and parents to learn how to work with their children when they're experiencing some of those behavioral outbursts. Because if you set up the environment for success, then it's very likely that the students' behaviors will kind of fall in line.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the misconceptions is that hey, we have to focus on the student, but the reality is that we also have to focus on our own behavior because behavior communicates a variety of things, and
Yeah.
the other thing too is if I break up with my wife or my girlfriend and I come to work and I'm not necessarily 100% there, what I'm feeling and what I'm going through, all of my thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are then going to impact the way that I engage and work with the
Yeah.
children. And so I have to rationally detach from that, and say, hey, I'm going to put this stuff aside so that I can spend 100% of my time and energy and effort on the kid that I'm trying to serve. Um,
Mm.
and then one of the other things that I think comes up very often is that we have a magic wand, and that's not necessarily the case. Every behavior is unique, and it's a process, and it takes time. It takes time on the part of everybody to engage, and um, but once you go through that process, and there's a lot of fidelity in the intervention, there's
Yeah.
a lot of reward at the end of that, and so
Mm-hmm.
I think that's another misconception.
Yeah, I think environment is a huge one. It's so important. We often hear the quote of "You are the sum of the five people you spend most time with," right? So that's obviously who you're spending time with, but I think in a way it's also the five people that you look up to or the five people you compare yourself to because you're trying to put yourself into those shoes. So if the environment that these kids are in with the teachers and the counselors and everyone else allows them to have a good projection as opposed to bad role models, then that's just the stacking wins on top of each other. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I always teach my, interns or new people that come in and or people that want to be mentored by me. I always tell them the first thing is teaching is influence multiplied. What I teach you today, you're going to go and teach 10 other people.
Mm.
What I model for you today, you're going to go and model for 10 other people and they're going to do the same thing. Um, and I think that it's important that even as professionals that we go in and we don't just drop theory bombs in the classroom. A lot of people go in there and say, "Oh, well, based on theory and research, you should do this, this, and this." But the reality is, like, show me how to do it. Spend the time to
Yeah.
show me how to do it and put theory into practice. And if we stop just going into classrooms or into homes and stop and throw theory bombs and actually show people how to do the work, I think
Yeah.
we find a lot more success.
Yeah, for sure. I don't remember the last time we're, I think we're always trying to learn new things. So like the podcast, I named it the business of learning for a reason, right? So I think the difference is actually doing things is how you truly learn. Like you'll kind of know something if you read about it and all these things, but actually going through the practice, doing it hands on, if it's something manual or if it's not something manual, but having that practical experience is what allows the learning to come through and that full understanding on the back end. I'm curious to hear though, you have to go through the process to know and understand the process. Have you found that there's a lot of hesitation from schools or districts to fully buy in and adapt to something that they're not really used to?
Yeah, school districts, unfortunately, there's a lot of red tape, there's a lot of bureaucracy, there's budgeting issues, there's timing issues. With families, some families want immediate gratification and aren't necessarily willing to put in the work long
Mhm.
term. And so there are definitely a lot of barriers, but I think, what we do is definitely a science, but it's also an art, and I think it's more of an art than a science. And so you have to be artful in the way that you communicate with people, you establish relationships, because establishing that baseline, that foundation, that human to human contact, that is going to be
Mhm.
key, because when things go bad, you're going to have that open conversation. You're going to be able to be honest. But if you don't have that connection and things go bad, then people get angry at each other, and
Mhm.
then that kind of things get derailed. And so I think for me, relationship building is huge, and just having the understanding that, hey, this is an art and it's not a science so much,
Mhm.
and being able to think outside the box is huge.
Yeah, because if you break people's trust, then that's gone forever, right? But if you're able to nurture that in a sustainable way, then people can see the value. And what do you think that you mentioned in the middle there that some parents they're not willing to put in the time? Do you think that just they have a wrong expectation or a misaligned expectation of what it should look like as opposed to what it actually plays out to be?
Yeah, sometimes I think parents are just naturally frustrated with kind of the hand that they've been given, and
Mm,
they haven't had a time to process. A lot of parents who have, kids with disabilities, they're with them all the time. We only get a snapshot, maybe an hour, 2 hours. The school gets about 6 hours a day with the kiddo, but then they get to go home, and families are there with them all the time, and so
mhm,
you sometimes feel the frustration, you hear the passion in their voice, um, and sometimes just doing that parent education, sitting there and listening to them
mm.
and helping them to kind of process the information, I think is huge too. And again, it goes back to this, the theory bombs, going in and just saying, "Hey, do this, this, and this." Well, I'm a parent and I know that what you're telling me might not work for my daughter, but it might work for my son, right? Or it might
Yeah.
work on Tuesday, but it's not going to work on Thursday, right?
Yeah. It's just really having that involvement. Like, hey, like let's all be a part of this together so we can work through it together. As opposed to like do something at school, send them home and hope for the best, fingers crossed. And then no one's aligned. Huh. Interesting. I really like the perspective. And I'd love to hear as well, kind of shifting the gear of the conversation into Beam and what you guys have going on. I think so many times it's as business owners, it's so flattering to talk about all the wins. And for example, you guys just achieved a huge feat. But I also like to talk about the challenges because I think that's where a lot of value comes from and people shy away from it. So talk to me a little bit more about what are some of the challenges that come through when looking at maintaining the company growth. Of course, you guys are doing phenomenal, but how do you look at strategizing or making sure that the team is aligned to make sure that sure we keep the company growth in the way that it's going, we make sure that clients still keep signing on, we make sure that revenue is consistent? What are some of the challenges that get in the way of all those things?
Mhm. Um, I think for me, it's really a challenge of waking up every morning and making sure that people have jobs. That's a heavy burden
Mm,
to have on somebody. We have over 200 employees. It's a really heavy burden for me on a daily basis to wake up to feel like, hey, I have to make sure that these people have work. For me, if I were selfish, I, sell the company and move on. I can get a job anywhere in state of California working in a school district making over $100,000 a year. I'd be okay, right? But some of the people that work for us, not necessarily so much. And so that's a heavy burden.
Mm.
And every year when we're done with our contracts, ensuring that we have another contract for the coming school year is really tough. And so we start that process in March and in April. But that's a heavy burden for us to kind of,
Mhm.
to deal with. Um, and I think the one way that we deal with it is that we just say, hey, you know what, we're going to stay positive. We're going to ride out some of these waves. There's sometimes budgets are tight, and we know that, hey, it's going to be tough maybe through October, but come December, January, February, things turn around for us. And so,
Mhm.
um, yeah, I mean, making sure people have work is tough. It's a heavy,
Yeah.
heavy.
I can hear in a lot of the things you're saying, Joe. I can hear the passion into one what you do, but also the care that you have for the people that are present in helping the impacts to be achieved. I'm wondering if that relates to anything from your past roles, your past careers, the past jobs that you've had, your experience before starting Beam. Is that correlated in any sense at all to how you also have the vision for your company?
Yeah, it directly you can draw a line from the way that I talk about my employees all the way to when I work for the sheriff's department, and
Hmm.
the sheriff's department's a great organization. The men and women that do that job are great people. For some people, it's not the best job. And for me, I was that person, and I would wake up daily and not want to go to work. I had 12 sick days a year. I would use all 12 sick days. But
Mm.
when I became a school psychologist, I never burned a sick day. I would use sick days if I had to go to the doctors, or if I had to take my kids to the doctors, or, burn vacation time. But I never really called out sick. I was there all the time. And I think the reason is because when I was with the sheriff's department, that was more about what I did rather than who I was as a person. And this is more about who I am as a person rather than what I do for a living. And I want to make sure that when my employees go to work, they want to go to work, and if
Hmm.
you don't want to go to work, then maybe this is not the job for you. Maybe you're just better off in another field, right? But at the end of the day, we have one singular purpose, and that's to help kids and help the kids that we serve, that we're contracted to serve. And so I want them to come to work, and
Yeah.
so we try our best to create a culture here where people want to come to work every single day. We just started this chant beam, whenever we have these team meetings or whatever, they start chanting beam, beam, beam. And as a leader,
Okay.
it feels good to hear that because
Yeah.
they want to be here, Um,
Mm.
and yeah, we can celebrate all of the wins that we have, but it's really we're our identity is based on how many times we've lost or the challenges we've gone through, right? And they're very, very few because we're always positive about who we are as a company. But who we are as a company is really based on the people that work for us, right? It's not because
Yeah.
of me or my business partner. It's because of the people that go to work every day and work with kids. I'm just sitting behind a desk in the office, but right now we have 200 and something employees that are out there servicing 200 families. So that's huge for
Mm.
us. Hmm.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. I like how you tied that back to. I think culture is such an under thing, and sometimes it can be like a vague term, like yeah, build your culture, and everyone's like, what does that even mean? That's what it means. Making sure everybody's aligned, right? Hey, is this something that you want to do? Yes, phenomenal. Come on, we'd love to have you on board. If not, that's okay as well. Just not here. Like it's okay. There are better opportunities for you elsewhere to find your purpose, to find your mission. But having that alignment internally is what I believe, dare I say, allowed you guys to achieve the success that has come so far, right? Because oh, that's so cool. That's so cool to hear. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
It's really an awesome story there. There's a question that I ask everyone, Joe, and I won't say everyone, 99% of people that I have on the podcast here. So you will also be a victim of this question. And here it is. You mentioned the magic wand. My question is also a magic wand question. Let's say you did have that magic wand and you could just magically wave it to solve one thing in the company, a challenge, an obstacle, looking towards the goals, looking towards the revenue target, the impact that you want to achieve, whatever that may be. You wave that wand, snap your fingers, your goals are able to happen by solving this one thing. What's the one thing you'd like to solve?
Um, Clarity and consistency from one year to the next in terms of contracting, uh,
Mm.
because a lot of our employees rely on this job And there's a lot of question marks come May and June if we don't get a contract from a district that we've previously worked with. It'd be really nice to know from one year to the next that we're going to have this work for these people, right? We're going to service these families. But budgeting sometimes gets in the way. There's a lot of talk about education budgets getting,
Mm.
pushed away or stopped. And that's going to be tough for a lot of people.
Hmm. And then the follow up to that, which not everybody gets to this part of the question, is what can you do to help that problem? What can you do internally? What can you guys work on um to overcome that obstacle?
Yeah, to some degree, we're a people first company. We're working with people, we're not selling a product. We really are working with individuals and some of the most vulnerable individuals in our community, individuals with disabilities. For me, in order to kind of promote that consistency and clarity is to be the face of the company and to promote how well we do with our contracts, right?
Mm,
And so that is a marketing strategy that we didn't
mm,
necessarily know about 5 years ago, but are becoming more in tune. And you know, the threat of another agency taking over our contracts are real, and so we just have to provide the best customer service as possible. And
mm.
for us, the best customer service is not answering a 1-800 number. For us, the best customer service is making sure kids are safe, making sure families
Yeah.
feel valued, and make sure teachers feel like they're participating in the work that we're doing. And the more that
Mm,
that, the more people can say, "Hey, Bean, that's a good company." They're a good company not because they show up on time. They're a good company because they value the kids that they work with, they value the families that they work with, and they value the districts that they work with as well. And say
uh,
we do our very very best to do that as much as many times as possible. I try to reach out to our directors that we work with. We do our best to send out, just appreciation, like Secretary Appreciation Week. We try to do stuff like that. And I think it's huge for people when they feel seen and heard and valued. I think it's huge. And that's what we try to do on a daily basis.
yeah, that's awesome because if that awareness then comes through through the marketing and the branding that happens, then the trust can also build, but also educating them on the value that you guys provide just
Yeah.
becomes so much simpler. So it all feeds into that positive loop cycle that of course helps the company grow, but allows the impact to happen on the other end of it as well.
Right.
Wow, that's really, really awesome. And actually, I wanted to dive into something you said previously in our conversation, which was the book Good to Great. Are there any other books that come to mind in this process of entrepreneurship that you've been on for a little while now that kind of jumped by you that you really enjoyed?
Yeah. There are actually a few books that I bought that I haven't had a chance to read, to be honest.
Okay. I'm guilty. I don't know if you can see behind me here. There's a lot. I'm
Right.
guilty of that as well.
Good to great. There was a bunch of other books. That I wanted to read, and I have a stack of them at home. But one of them that I really, really want to get to is this Jamie Dimon's biography. Jamie Dimon's the CEO of Chase
Mhm.
Bank. But just I think who he is as a leader really inspires me because he's kind of no nonsense. He's a realist, but also not afraid, I think, to take chances. And so I really want to get to that book. I
Mhm.
was trying to get into books more like self-helpy books, like how to be a good CEO and things like that. But after reading Good to Great, I don't think that you can. I think good CEOs are born that way. I think they have a skill
Mhm.
set that eventually will come and rise to the top based on whatever scenarios come out. And I was
Yeah.
never a
Huh.
business owner up until 2019, and I feel like because I was put in this position that all of the skills that I learned growing up in elementary school, in high
Mhm.
school, from my parents, working in the sheriff's department, working at a school district, all of those things are now coming to fruition. And I'm pulling from all of these experiences to be a good CEO.
Mhm.
And I want to achieve greatness, but you can't, right? I mean, once you do, what's the next step? So every
Mhm.
day I do my best to do something um, that's going to pull from all those experiences and then add value, hopefully, or impact to
Yeah.
somebody else's life. Impact is one of our core values. Is whatever you do, don't do it for just doing it. Right? You want to
Mhm.
do it because you want to impact somebody's life.
Yeah.
Like your work
Purpose.
is real and it's purposeful. Yeah. And I
Mm.
try to tell people that, in our company, every chance I get, is that what you do is important and you're important.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really, really awesome. And thank you for the book recommendation. I always like getting those ones, even though you haven't read it. But I'll probably add it to my shelf of unread books as well. It's been a common theme this past few, I would say the past couple of months. So many people have been recommending autobiographies, biographies to myself. Um, I think because we get that raw version of these entrepreneurs that went through it all, like just take all of this value, please, like learn from my mistakes. So I think it's definitely something very worth doing. And I wanted to ask as well if you're familiar with Patrick Lencioni. Are you familiar with Patrick?
Not too much, no.
Okay, so Patrick Lencioni is also an author, and he has a book called The Motive. It's a book that's very short. You can probably read it in like 90 minutes, probably even less. Um, but it's a book on leadership and some of the things that you were talking about, like, hey, being a good CEO, managing people in the right way. But that one is so interesting because it's not about the tactics itself. Like it's to an extent, but more so on how to, you know what? I'll probably butcher the explanation, but it's worth a read. It's worth a read. Patrick Lencioni, The Motive. So it's a really good book. Uh, Final question that I have here for you, Joe. Thank you so much for your time. This has been awesome. It's actually not a question from me. It's a question from our last guest to you, and they had no idea who you were. So, are you ready for the question?
Yeah.
So here it is. This is an interesting one. What is the biggest mistake that you made when you were first starting out that you're now better equipped to avoid?
The biggest mistake that I made when I first started out was thinking that I knew everything about everything. Um, you quickly are humbled when you step into an HR meeting and you start to hear all of the, laws and policies and things that go along with HR. You're like, oh, I didn't know that. Um,
Yeah.
and the quicker I realized that I did not know everything, the quicker I realized to stay in my own lane, but to also listen, because I think that's powerful. Um, you know, in counseling, we have this term called taking the stance of not knowing, in that as a counselor or as a therapist, you don't want to go to a session just bulldozing the conversation or giving advice immediately. You want to take the stance of not knowing and you want to listen and learn. And the sooner I started doing that with my team and listening and learning, the more that I was able to say, hey, now I'm seeing the problem from different perspectives. Now, as a CEO, I can put the pieces together and then offer clear and concise advice about how to tackle some of these issues. And that was key for me. So, yeah, one of the biggest mistakes is just walking into a room and thinking you're the most important person, because ultimately you're not, right?
Oh, that's awesome. The more you know, the more you find out that you don't know nothing. You don't know anything, right? Wow, that's a good one. It's always a good reminder there as well. I love that. Joe, thank you so much for your time. This has been such an incredible chat. Where should people go if they want to learn a little bit more about you or maybe a little bit more about Beam?
Yeah, they can go to beam-llc.org. And, our website's pretty robust, and there's a profile there about me, and you can go in there and dive deep. And yeah, it's a good website. And we're also starting a second company, the ABA company, and that's just up and running now. So we'll have that website up and running soon.
Awesome. Very cool. I'll, of course, leave everything down below here if you want to check that out and you're listening to this episode. And if you want to hear more conversations like this and you enjoyed listening to this and want to hear more conversations like this, please hit the subscribe button and I will see you on the next episode. Thank you so much for your time, Joe. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.